Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday, and welcome to Restoring Our Roots podcast, the voice of the Decriminalize Nature movement. This podcast is a gathering space where we explore the wisdom of entheogenic plants and fungi, the beauty of natural healing, and the importance of reconnecting with the sacred earth. Twice a month, we'll hear from visionaries, healers, and advocates who are working with entheogenic plants and fungi, exploring realms of consciousness, and returning us to a balanced relationship with nature. Pretty excited. This is season 3 already. It's been going pretty quickly. Thank you, Rachel, for your help, and really excited to have Ian today on as our first guest. My name is Larry Norris. I'm the co-founder of, or many guests to me. This is, I think, what, season 3, episode 5. So we get 4. It's episode 4. So we have a fourth episode on season 3 already, which is great. My name is Larry Norris. I'm the co-founder of Decriminalize Nature and the national organizing director. I've been lucky enough to teach people all across the U.S. and help them support passing policy locally in their jurisdictions. I think we are now about 30 cities across the U.S. have passed. I think there are now 10 million people living in decriminalized areas. So if you'd like to help support the local movement, help get decriminalization passed in your area, please reach out to us at decriminalizenature.org. We have a monthly orientation we can set you up on, and we have a pretty strong 2026 already. The last orientation, I think we had over 30 people show up, which is pretty impressive. Usually we average about 10, so about 3 times that amount right now in places that you wouldn't expect, which is great. And we talked a little bit about your neck of the woods as well there, Ian.
Great.
And then also we have Rachel behind the scenes. Thank you, Rachel, for all the help you're doing, helping with the production back there. Really appreciate all your efforts. Rachel is posting these after today. We have this on YouTube, Rumble and Odyssey, and then after today, in about a week or two, we'll find this on Spotify and the other platforms like iHeartRadio, etc. If you'd like to make a donation to help support this amazing movement and show, you can do so on the podcast platforms as well by clicking the donate button. And for any live listeners, keep in mind that Rachel will be adding any questions or comments you have to the end of this conversation. So go ahead and put those in the chat box, and Rachel will be curating those and gathering those together for the end of the show. So really excited to have our guest speaker today. We have Ian Cook. Ian is coming from Kansas, which you don't really hear much of a psychedelic conversation, but you've been doing some really incredible work out there. Ian is the founder of Kansas Psychedelic Society. He's a psychedelic integration coach and educator, and also very interested in creativity and archetypes. I know we've had some pretty amazing conversations on in the past with that. You have that awesome background there, which I think is your own hand as well, which is incredible. And really excited to have this discussion today. So, how are you doing today, Ian?
I am doing very well. Thank you, Larry. And thank you, Rachel, in the background. Yeah. Yes, hello. I live here in Lawrence, Kansas. I've been involved in the psychedelic space for almost 5 years now. Um, yeah, just really kind of trying to find community, building a network here in Kansas, and then extending out into the rest of the heartland, out to Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. A couple years ago, I started the Lawrence Psychedelic Society. We just recently last year formed as an official nonprofit, and we're starting to branch out into education, awareness, safety, risk reduction, trying to help inform people as they're coming into this space. Mm.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's so important to be getting these conversations in all different locations, and I think this is sort of the more conversations we have in places that you don't expect it, the easier, the harder it is for people to just dismiss this as a California thing or a San Francisco thing or a Colorado thing or what have you.
Mhm.
So that's really, I've been really excited to see sort of some of the progress you've been having out there. So before we start off on the conversation today, maybe, I mean, you gave us a little bit of a background there, but how
Yeah,
did you come to this area of interest, and what brought you
sure.
to the world of psychedelics?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, happy to share some of my background. So my education in psychedelics started maybe about like 9 or 10 years ago now. I have a close loved one who unfortunately, as a result of psychedelics, has schizophrenia. And they were unfortunately in just a bad relationship, an abusive partnership, and psychedelics were a part of that abuse. And as a result, they have these mental health conditions. And so our education, me and my family's, it started a long time ago of trying to figure out what happened, what went wrong, how can we maybe hopefully prevent that from happening in the future as well. And so that was kind of my early days in the space of just caution and safety and learning the rights and the wrongs. And kind of just in the background in the psychedelic space, not doing too much actively. But about 4 years ago, I was kind of thrust into the space. I had my own mental health crisis. So I have bipolar 1, and I had a manic episode as a result of this loved one also having a crisis. I kind of had a crisis with their crisis. Um, But once I kind of stabilized from that, got back to a baseline, I went through a ketamine therapy. So I did IV ketamine, 6 weeks, 1 day a week, did 6 sessions, and even after that first session, I felt like a new person. It was like the computer was turned off and on. You don't know what's going on with it, but all of a sudden it's working again. And so it felt like my whole system was kind of communicating again, my mind, my heart, my gut, all my different systems. I've had depression and anxiety since high school, and after those first couple sessions, I didn't feel like I was depressed for the first time in a long time, and that was just a beautiful window of clarity and presence, and so I was like, okay, what here's what's laid before me. What can I do with it? And again, thinking in terms of archetypes and story and narrative, we didn't choose for these things to happen to us. These things were kind of just thrust upon us, and so my past few years has kind of been a reaction to that initial event of crisis and what am I going to do in the face of crisis. Um, and so I got more involved in maybe more of the online psychedelic space. I was connecting with a lot of folks on LinkedIn, trying to find people because I couldn't really find anybody locally. And so my web was kind of pretty large of a global national level. And then I kind of narrowed a little bit more and I started going out to Kansas City for a couple years and networking out there, finding some folks in Missouri that were doing the work. And then once I had that connection out further, I kind of just locally, just more and more narrow and more local. And then I focused on Lawrence, Kansas for just a couple years. And that's when I started the Lawrence Psychedelic Society. Because again, I was looking for groups. I was like asking people around town. I was like, is there a psychedelic society here? Nothing really officially. And I was kind of surprised because Lawrence is this weird little spot in the middle of the country. We had the Beat Poets coming through, Allen Ginsberg and Kerouac and Burroughs. Yeah, he had a place here, and so we're in this like weird little vortex, and Lawrence is like the most blue little town in a red sea. And so for me, I love Lawrence. I've been here since 2009, and it really feels like home. And so it felt like to me the best place for me to start psychedelic work. And so I got very, very, very local down to myself. And so I worked on myself for a bit, and then I started to spread back out again. So it's expansions and contractions and trying to figure all this stuff out. And yes, so in that, I figured out a good system for myself, a way to manage my bipolar with exercise, diet, creative writing, expression, all this stuff in the background is a product of this exploration of myself and consciousness and creativity and how do I make sense of the world. And so I make sense with creative writing, poetry, art, music. I play an ambient folk project. And tarot card, I do tarot card readings as well. It's just this fun, playful exploration of life through games and stories. And so far, that's helped serve me very well in this space.
Yeah, it's great. What a great story, and especially, coming from your own personal story and some of the challenges. We hear a lot about the positives, but also, we have to be aware these are powerful substances and that things can go awry, and then we kind of have to figure out how to navigate that space when that comes around. But then being in a space where you're not finding that community and having to be like, and this is probably the same for many of the listeners out there. If you don't find a community out there, what do? You do what Ian did, which is like start it yourself, and then find the other people, put up that sort of that beacon for everyone to say, okay, here's where I can go to gather, because maybe it's just somebody that just there's a lot of people there probably. It sounds like, especially in a place like Lawrence, you just got to put up the light to let everyone know, hey, this is happening, this conversation is going on, and then beautiful things can happen from there. And I went to Lawrence once upon a time, a long time ago. I think it was 1998 or something, like 1999. And I thought the same
Yeah,
thing. It was a friend was going to school out there. He's actually a
yeah.
DJ. And
Oh, cool.
the same sort of thing. I was like, wow, this is totally unexpected. This space in the middle of the heartland, so to speak. And, it's
Yeah.
like, it's got this really interesting vibe to it. And it's good energy and good artists and creative thought and all this kind of thing that I wouldn't necessarily have expected. How much do you feel like the Lawrence kind of like creativity fed into you, or you fed into it, or is it was kind of a mutual thing there? Talk to us a little bit about more about sort of the Lawrence scene out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, no, definitely. I think I found a home here because I just felt so connected, and so it just resonated with who I am as a creative person. And so yeah, so I came here in 2009. Um, I grew up overseas out in the Middle East. My dad worked in the oil industry, and so I grew up overseas internationally in Doha, Qatar. We lived there for like 8 years, and then Muscat, Oman. We lived there for 8 years as well. So I was overseas for like 16 years.
Mm.
But my dad grew up here in Kansas, and so he grew up in Topeka, and so my grandparents were still in Topeka at the time I was going to school. So we'd come to Lawrence a few times here and there during the summers. So I would spend summers here in Kansas, school year overseas, and then summers here in Kansas. And I think that really, really informed my worldview and how I see people. If people are just people all
Mm.
across the world, we all want the same things. We all go through similar experiences. And so to bring that like Midwestern mindset of do what you do, don't harm anyone, but people are generally just very, very like whoever you are. It's a lot more of a purple kind of state than I think people will admit. But the mindset of folks is very much of easygoing, light, welcoming, compassionate. And so I wanted to come here to be close to my grandparents because my family was still kind of all over the place when I was going to college. And so KU, here at the University of Kansas, Jayhawks, go Jayhawks. Some folks may have heard of our basketball team. Um, but I love the town so much, and I just resonated with it. Yeah, I'm English major, so my focus was poetry, of course. Um, and so I got to connect with folks here. I got to join writing groups. I did poetry readings. Got really connected with the music scene here. The music scene here is awesome. I'm a big fan of like metal and punk and hardcore and all these very expressive genres. And so yeah, I was in a band for a little bit, doing vocals,
Mm.
and just being a creative person here in Lawrence. And so creativity had become a big part of my personal care and my just how I operate in the world too. And so it was a very nice like home space for me to like develop and continue to grow and say like what do I want to make as a creative person? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. And you were mentioning at the beginning there about how someone had some challenges with schizophrenia. You were also working with
Mhm.
some bipolar challenges
Mhm.
as well. How much did creativity play into that and psychedelics? You know, you talk about kind of the intersection. You also went a little bit in the ketamine world. Maybe w- both. How did you navigate those realms and help sort of people around that? And then also, what do you see as sort of the advantage of ketamine versus maybe another type of psychedelic, or do you think that there's some similarities? Yeah.
Yeah, oh no, good question. Thank you. Yeah, so schizophrenia, bipolar, those are very, very difficult conditions. A lot of folks really, really struggle when they have those conditions. Medication adherence and compliance is a huge thing. So I tell folks, especially with bipolar, and at least my experience, I'm on medications for the rest of my life, but I'm okay with that because my medications help me. They help keep me stable. They help me go to sleep. My loved one had their crisis after I think like 3 nights of no sleep. And I think I was like 2 nights of no sleep. And that's what really caused the crisis was just that lack of sleep. And then it starts a cycle, and then the cycle just spins out of control. And and so I learned how to regulate myself. I learned how to regulate energy in terms of like too much and manic energy and like doing too many things, wanting to do too much. That was my manic crisis. I just wanted to do everything all at once. And I became very impatient when things wouldn't turn out the way I wanted. And so it was not a sustainable mindset. And of course that's crisis. And I had to get that under control. And so I went to a local mental health facility here. I got diagnosed with a crisis counselor that was very, very kind and very compassionate, and I got prescribed medications, and that helped me go to sleep for a bit. And then that's when I kind of got back to that baseline. Um, and so managing something like bipolar, uh, very interesting contrast in terms of an experience of consciousness. Because with the manic episode, it felt like I was connected to everything all at once. It was overwhelming. I couldn't. I had this like distinct understanding of like everything is connected in a certain way, but in that manic crisis, it's like a little too connected. Where like songs on the radio felt like it was for me, or I would see signs, or someone would say something, and it would be like in a conversation somewhere else. I'd be like, "Oh, are they talking to me or about me?" So like just like grandiosity and paranoia and all those um, signs of something's not quite right. And so that was a type of consciousness that was very electric, very fiery, very like high energy. And then contrasting that with the ketamine experience I had, again, a connection to consciousness and a connection to everything, but it was calm and gentle and slow and nice and warm. during my IV ketamine session, I think it was like, it was administered over the course of like 15, 20 minutes or so. So there was this like gentle come up. And as I was in the facility, I had blankets on, blinders, eye masks. I had my whole set and setting kind of designed myself because the clinic itself it was very much a clinic. It was not very conducive to like a comfy experience. So I had to make it as comfortable as possible. But on the come up of that, ketamine coming in, I was doing box breathing, so counting inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And so by the time I got to like the peak of the administering, I was in this like my body was breathing on its own. I felt very safe and comfortable. And then like I narrowed down into this like single point of this breath. And then at some point it was just like boop, nothing. And then I felt like myself was whatever was in me. I felt like I was like shot up out of my body out into like everything else. And so like I couldn't tell where like my body ended or began. And so I felt as big as everything. And as I was in the midst of that experience, it felt like I was like moving through this space. I describe it as like a lazy river through the cosmos. It also felt like I was in like this barrel of a wave that's like infinitely crashing. So like interesting like feelings of movement and being in a portal and being in the cosmos and out there. And so I just felt like at peace. And it felt like if this is death or if this is the afterlife, if I'm outside my body and it's like this, like that's beautiful and that's comforting. And so when I came out of that experience, I didn't feel like I was scared of like what comes after this, me and this thing ends. And so again, a different conception of connectivity to everything and to higher power. And so those two different experiences have shaped my understanding of my own consciousness and my own interaction with this whole, whatever this thing we're in. Uh, and to be able to try to understand that for myself and then to translate it, that's where all this like art and all this like creativity came from, is like my attempt to take my experience, distill it down into this thing, and then come up with a certain system or a way of being that would help enable me to continue doing this work. And so being a creative person, I was like, oh yeah, of course, creative things, rely on my strengths. And so yes, I relied on my strengths. I relied on my values. I value communication. I value creativity. I value community and communion, and trying to at least understand within myself what am I doing here. And so it's been that's my integration process. My integration is creative expression, and that's a big part of what I teach with folks. And I do coaching and consulting through my private business, Alvadine Consulting, and that's what I help folks with, is like, what's the system to be in? I do health and wellness coaching, which is what makes you healthy, what makes you well, whole person health, mind, body, spirit. And so in my own exploration of like, how can I create the system to be as a person and to manage bipolar and all these other conditions, it's turned into this very creative, fun process where I can just be myself. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, you speak to a question that a lot of people have around, even like is ketamine technically a psychedelic or is it dissociative? But
Mhm.
what you speak to there is relevant. Even something that I've noticed, it's like while it might not be officially called psychedelic, it is a psychedelic phenomenology. It's like this all one. This is like you're beyond yourself. You're this interconnected. This weird where's one connect and one disconnect. Like all
Sure.
that, there are very psychedelic effects to it, and so
Mm.
it makes sense that they're kind of like people speak about it in that same kind of area. For me, the first time I tried it, it was like I've had some weird experiences, and this still ranks up there in weird experiences. Which is surprising. I didn't expect it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how would you, when from your ketamine experiences to other psychedelic experiences, what kind of
Mhm.
how would you, maybe for somebody totally new that doesn't know the difference, what would you say the
Sure.
differences between the two would be?
Yes, no, definitely. Yeah, interesting contrast, because I guess it's a dissociative, it's an anesthetic, so it's like psychedelic adjacent. So it's like not like the classic psychedelics like psilocybin or MDMA, or LSD. And so and yeah, it's hard to so it's different in terms of mechanism. So it's a lot shorter. So a ketamine experience can be anywhere from like 60, 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the administration. So there's the IV, there's intramuscular. You can do troches, which is like a sublingual. You put something under your cheek and hold it for like 15 minutes. And then there's nasal sprays, but the nasal sprays are like lower dose. So with like the high dose ketamine, I think of it like that's like the macro dose
Mhm.
in relation to like psilocybin or LSD or something like that. So that's where you get like that's where I got like the ego dissolution, the out of body experience, the complete shutdown. Um, and so it's much shorter lasting, uh, which I think is something that, at least in my own theories in terms of bipolar, is shorter lasting is more safe. So the longer medicines like ayahuasca, I can't take ayahuasca because of medications. LSD even is like a long experience. So I that's where it's like you get into these riskier zones of entering cycles or being in an experience too long
Mhm.
kind of mimics that like lack of sleep. And and that's just in my personal experience. And again, just like a thing of safety of like be very, very, very careful if you have these conditions because things can go wrong. And it takes, in my opinion, at least a very strong structure of mental health support, having a counselor, having a good support team, people knowing what you're going through and being able to support you in case anything does go wrong. Hopefully not, but um, so that's kind of the separations. I have had other psychedelic experiences, but again, I'm very, very careful. I really don't push things too far. I do, if anything, lower doses and still glean a lot of insight and have really good healing experiences. But so I know what medicines work best for me. Ketamine works for me. Other psychedelics, I try not to push it or like I don't need to. Um, Someone explained to me they only use cannabis and they do like edibles, but they're like they've talked about entering these spaces. So it's kind of like we're getting to the same destination, just different ways to get there.
Sure, right. Yeah,
Sure.
there's a professor at the school I went to, CIS, that talks about like we're all looking at the same lake. We're just looking at it from different, beds, right? So
Yeah.
so it's all like the same thing. We'll get there eventually. There's a spot that we're all going to, but that also
Mhm.
then takes out this idea that like, it sort of homogenizes stuff. It's like we're all going there from different perspectives, but our perspectives are also unique, and that's also
Mhm.
relevant to the conversation. I heard you speak there a little bit about some of your challenges around the manic states is like this hearing songs, thinking they're for you, seeing a street sign, thinking, how, because I know we talked about this a lot on the show in the past, is like how important synchronicity is and coincidence can come into play.
Mhm.
I know you're a
Yep.
fan of Jung and other folks as well. How do you discern
Mhm.
between like, oh, I'm having this moment, or like, hey, maybe
Mhm.
this is something that I have to be paying attention to in terms of synchronicity or coincidence or what have you?
Sure. Yes. And that was a lesson in the first year of trying to figure all this stuff out is like what's the thin line between symptomatic versus synchronicity
Right.
and where am I getting a little too squirrely in things? And I think that the term discernment is very, very appropriate because like I have an experience, psychedelic or no, and I have to look at it and say like what was that? What am I supposed to take away from this? Is this something that just happened and it was just this weird like series of connections that I can personally make connections with? And I think that's my understanding of synchronicities is a series of events that have a personal meaning for you specifically, or myself specifically of these things happen in such a way that I'm like, oh, here's all these connections that I can kind of put together and then assign my own meaning to it. Similarly too with psychedelic experiences is like I've heard of folks and I've worked with folks that they have this thing that they don't quite understand. And if they try to assign too much meaning to it too quickly, they can kind of get lost in it and they can maybe go down this path that maybe was not the most helpful path for them. Um, and so that's kind of where, again, the journaling, yes, I love my
Mhm.
journal. This is my like magic tome. This is where I process. It's where I dialogue with myself. It's where like I put my experiences down here on this page. I don't have to hold them as much and
Mhm.
then I can go look at it later as I've gone back to my regular life, as I go back to work, as I go back to chopping wood and carrying water. And then I come back and I say, okay, what did this mean for me? What insights or new knowledge or understanding about myself can I take from that experience and then try to affect some sort of behavior change or something that I want to grow into or something that I want to see in this world. And so that's kind of my process and my understanding of the psychedelic work is and life work in general too. I have an experience, I end that experience, and then I have to look at it from this like objective, like third person view, where I can say like, okay, what was the meaning of this? Where can I see like this narrative kind of forming to? And so I again to tie it back to my personal life experience with family and those mental health crises, I'm like, why did those things happen? Why did these things happen to me and my family? Same thing. I think of substance use, and I used to be an alcoholic, and about 7 years sober from alcohol now too. And I wonder why did that get so bad? And it's because I feel like I had to get ill and then I had to recover. Same thing with so that the alcoholism preceded my mental health crisis. And so I after I went through sobriety, I got therapy and medications. And so that was a chunk of time where I got bad and I got better. And then a couple years later, I had my mental health crisis where I got bad and then I got better. But I had these other tools from this like other thing. So it's like there's that narrative of like I had those life experiences, so I can have these life experiences, and I'm having this life experience, so I can have something in the future. And so I'm thinking in like the big term of like the end of my life versus the present versus the beginning of it, and what's this unfolding narrative that's just always happening.
Right, yeah, and you know, it takes some definite work to be able to see that sort of broad view perspective, especially when you're in the
Mhm.
sauce and things are
Yeah,
coming at you fast, and you're like, no, no, but
yeah,
this, you know, so
yeah.
so that's and I can imagine, you know, you showed your journal there, and I'm sure creativity is also part of this, and you know, art and all that type of thing works for me as well. But
Mm.
you know, there's something about being able to you know, take what's like really in your head and like put it somewhere else for a minute. You know, they say like spiders will like put knowledge in the web so they don't have to like go back, they don't have to hold it in their container, right? They
Ooh,
can just go back and read it later.
that's
Same
cool.
thing. Like you're sort of working on this process and then you can
Cool.
kind of put it into a journal and like let it sit for a minute and then you know it's
Yeah.
there as you come back to it later and sort of reflect upon it. And I think what a good way, you know, a good explanation of what journaling is all about is really just giving your head a little space to reflect upon this later, where you know you got that information down there, and then now you have an opportunity. Do you often go back to
Sure.
your journals and sort of you know look back? What was I doing on this day? Oh wow, here's an
Yeah.
insight I forgot I had.
Yeah, that's something that's funny. Folks ask me that quite often too. It's very occasional, and sometimes it's when I'm like more of an intentional, like okay, like I want to go back and like look at something from like a few months ago because I was working on something in the present moment, and it reminded me of something like a few months ago. I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I can pull out knowledge or experience from that thing and like bring it up into the present. But it's not something I do super often. Sometimes I'll just like flip through it to look through it because that's kind of a nice like just reflective process too. Um, but a lot of it just kind of sits in the journals, and that's okay too. Like it doesn't always have to be this like ongoing engagement with it. Sometimes it is just to like get it out of my head and out of my body, and then just to like let it sit and just like marinate. While these other background behavior changes, because behavior change takes a while. There's no like set like, oh, I'll get this done in 3 months, and it'll always be this 3 month process. And so sometimes different things are unfolding at different times, but the journal really does allow me to have that objective third person view, and allows me to I love that idea of spiders put knowledge in the web. I love that of it's all there waiting for me when I need it. Yeah.
And yeah, how because I know there's I'm just speaking for my process a little bit on this. Like when I put
Mhm.
something on a journal, it kind of gets stored away too, but like the artwork behind you or the music you
Mhm.
play, like that's
Yeah.
a whole nother level of being able to receive it in a different way. You're looking at this in a nonverbal way. It's sort of pleasurable, it's
Yes. Yeah.
aesthetically pleasing. But
Mhm.
I still have paintings that I look at, and even though I like see the broader spectrum, oh look at this piece, and I like look at it specifically, I'm like, oh yeah, this reminds me of this. How
Yeah.
how does the transition from text or words to, and I know you're a poet too, so you're already kind of in that liminal space with words,
Mm.
into creative, maybe artwork or music.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
how to differentiate that, and what can you draw differently from more of the
Yeah.
sort of more visual or auditory
Yeah.
sounds?
Ooh, yeah, I love that. Yes, that's a good direction to move in, because I feel like with the words it can be really hard because like what are words but like shapes and symbols that carry sound and then meaning within it. So that itself is just like a heady like esoteric concept. But oftentimes the words are just the translation. Like it's the map is not the territory. Like we're just trying to translate an experience, and sometimes words are just a really pale comparison of that. So that's kind of where the art kind of comes into. And with the journaling, yeah, sometimes it is like art and words, and so it's kind
Okay,
of hard
yeah,
to
yeah.
say. But like I'm drawing on like tarot cards. The journaling itself is a very fluid process, that turns into art and drawing and all that stuff too. Um, but I do think, at least in my experiences, that the nonverbal, so art and music, have been like really important for me, because in my own understanding, uh, an experience, it by its nature is nonverbal. It's not in words. It's feelings and sounds and light and colors and all these things that, like, how do you how do you put that on paper, and then how do you like explain that to somebody and have it make sense? And so that's where art and music makes so much more sense, because it's like your thoughts and your feelings. And how do you translate thoughts into feelings? Like, you put it out into something that also creates more thoughts and feelings. So that's why, like, music is this beautiful transportation of thought. And I've talked to a few folks, and I'm in agreement of, I think a music choice can really, really, really help shift and shape the experience, especially with ketamine. From what I've worked with in clients is, depending on if you have like more high energy music, that gives you a different experience. If you have more like wave ambient sounds and more nature sounds, that can give you also a very different experience. And and then being able to revisit those sounds and those songs and music. Like, I listened to a, was like a 2 hour like jazz concept album by Kamasi Washington, who's a tenor saxophonist. That was, I listened to an album called Heaven and Earth on my first ketamine trip. And I go back and listen to it today, and I'll just sit with it and listen to it and meditate. And it takes me right back into that experience. And so, like, what is that? To me, that feels like some sort of like time travel, or like I get to go relive that and then say, like, revisit those like calm feelings and that feeling of peace and that feeling of connectedness too. And so, like, I don't have to keep on doing psychedelics. I don't have to keep on doing drugs. I can, like, my practice overall to engage with creativity and all these other things has become stronger as a result of my psychedelic experience. And I think that's a really big selling point for this medicine and this work, is that it's not traditional, like you have to keep revisiting it, you have to take this pill forever. You can kind of get better and improve your skills and your practice too.
Mhm.
um, and then to share a little bit more about whatever's going on in the background here. So after I had a psilocybin experience biking out in the wetlands. There's wetlands south of town here in Lawrence, called Baker Wetlands. And I biked back. I was in the shower, cleaning myself off, metaphorically, literally. And the words "cosmic water closet" just popped in my head. And with poetry, a lot of the times it's just like words or a phrase will like pop in my head. I'm like, what the fuck? Or excuse me, what is going on here? And so I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. But I called out to my wife and I was like, write this down. I don't know what this is. Please write this down. So, and that's sometimes the process of the psychedelic experience too. You get an insight, don't try to digest it, just get it out, write it down. And so over the course of a few months, the idea kept like percolating in my head, and then eventually it turned into this, like, it sounds like a tavern. It sounds like the name of a tavern, the Cosmic Water Closet. And then
Fair.
so I had this image of a tavern floating out in space in the cosmos. From the outside, sometimes it looks like just like a little outhouse, just like floating. But then once you open the door, it turns into this tavern.
Mm.
So it's a liminal space. It's a thought form, egregore, this place you can go in your imagination, the imaginal realm, from Jung. Um, and you can go there and you can meet me in frog form, Ian, Jan. You can see this name on the book. Jan is a pet name because my name is Ian, Ian, but my wife calls me Jan sometimes. And so I had this, I love frogs, and frogs are very an important symbol for me too, as being someone of mixed race. I've been swimming since I was a kid, so like in and out of water, I'm this weird hybrid. Frogs are important for me in terms of growth of like tadpole to from frog spawn to tadpole into fully formed thing. And so I was like, okay, let me put myself into this creative framework and then see what happens when I like interact with it in very intentional ways and just continue to develop and grow it. And the more and more I interacted with it, the more it gave me back like insight and lessons. And of course, this thing that I can interact with, that's myself and it's from myself. And so for me, that was like, that's one of my biggest integration pieces, is this creation that came from inside me, and of these insights and gifts that were just like planted in my head. And then I got to take that seed and I got to tend to it and grow it. And as a result, now it's informed my consulting practice. It informs how I am in community, teaching creative writing classes and this integration work and education. I can do it in a really fun and creative way so that people can come in and do some really heavy lifting and really serious work, but in such a way that is light and playful and fun, so that they're not weighed down by it so hard.
Mm.
And then similarly too, they can hop out of it and go be a person again. And so it's all a kind of a lesson. It's a best practice. It's a metaphor of my understanding of how this psychedelic work can take place, and then how the self and the individual can flower and blossom in their own beautiful creative ways. Everyone has their own kind of magic. Everyone has their own kind of creativity. I love to help pull it out and evoke it. And again, very esoteric of it's within you. It's all within you. How can we help pull it out?
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to touch on something you said a little bit ago because we had the same conversation last week with Gwen, which is like
Mm,
how do we use music as an integration tool? And so I
mm,
think now we have a secondary corroboration of like whenever you're doing a journey, make sure you get your playlist down or whatever song you're listening to because going back in the future and just even just
mm,
listening to those songs
mm,
can transport you back to that moment in time where you had this breakthrough, you've learned this lesson, this insight, whatever else. And I think that's so great that you're actually able to remember what some of your first listenings were, and then be able to go
yeah,
back to that and really get that same sense of calm and peace that you got in the
yeah.
first experience there, which is pretty
Mm,
beautiful.
mm,
And in terms of the artwork and everything, I'm always curious too. Do you find in your artwork, again, speaking just from how I've sort of explored artwork, that certain symbols just they demand to be put out there. Like they're just like no matter what, this has got to be. Or you see
yeah,
it like I'm doing some
yeah,
sort of pareidolia thing, and the symbol
yeah.
comes. Has there a symbol that's going to come up a lot for you that you didn't know what it
Yes.
was, and then after you sort of started playing with it a little bit, you've done a little research, and sounds like you've done some esoteric research as well, and found a whole world that kind of opened up from the symbol that you didn't previously know of, and what when
Mhm.
we tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Oh, I love that. That's a good question. Um, so yeah, so in terms of this idea of communication, ever since I was young, communication's been really important to me. My parents, when we were younger, they would just fight, very very verbal and very loud, and so I learned early on what was bad communication. It was just yelling over each other, being the last one to yell at someone. You're the winner of this conversation, if that was a conversation. And so that's informed how I think of communication as a value. And then poetry was how I communicated in my younger years when I couldn't process my thoughts and feelings in ways I couldn't express it to people. I didn't know how to. I didn't have the language. And so poetry was my language. Poetry was how I was trying to capture myself in those moments in those times. And so with my poetry, a lot of the symbols that were coming through that was with nighttime and the moon and the quietness and bones and ghosts and spirits because I felt like those are the things that were just alive for me at the time. It's how I was trying to understand my own experience. And then in later years, communication later developed into this. I still remember it. It was a friend gave me my first like tarot card reading, and it was this the Hermetic Tarot, which is a tarot deck based on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And so just like packed with symbolism, a lot of different systems. Aleister Crowley was a part of that group, but he got kicked out. But there's a lot of other really good practitioners in that group. That did a lot of really good work, and it was like kind of just like mishmash of different systems into this own unique thing. And so in my first tarot card reading, it pulled out the magician. And so the magician was this powerful archetype of, again, this like I see this guy as a magician of playing games and telling stories and doing very spiritual work, but in a light and playful way. And then digging more into magician archetypes and communication archetypes, Hermes came along. And so if you see here, this little caduceus,
Hmm.
um, and then the turtle, also another symbol of Hermes too. Uh, I when I was biking out in the wetlands south of town, I would see turtles, and I would see turtles in places where they wouldn't normally be. So like on the edge of the wetlands, like over this like hill, and then like by this roadside, like the I don't know how the dude got over there, but is I was biking by it and I noticed it because I was like looking on the ground and at that certain time, and if I wasn't present, I wasn't noticing, I wasn't looking, I would have missed the symbol. And so other strange symbols like that. Things out in nature. And so the more and more I looked into like, okay, here's this animal that appeared, and I would go look it up and say like what deities or gods are attached to this symbol. Similarly too with communication. And so my practice has become this
Which is also a Hermes trait, right? Communication.
Yeah, communication deity. And so thinking of Hermes, he takes messages from up above down to this plane, down below into hell, and back and above. So I'm thinking of communication growing across barriers. I think of communication in terms of like this is a communication. When I'm emailing people, texting people, that's me like going through portals and different boundaries. When I'm communicating face to face with people, that's a different kind of communication and interface. And so like I pray to communication as like a value and as an archetype. And I think that's like broad enough that enables something out there that is based on communication to like see me doing it and be like, oh, he's trying to interface with this concept. Let's provide other things that help serve that concept. And so when I do like this esoteric and occult work, it's very much archetype value based, and it's broad enough that like it's not a specific thing that I get too attached to, but something in life comes along that is within that realm of the archetype, if that kind of makes sense. And so I get to interact with these systems in a way that is, again, for me, fun and playful and creative, but I don't become too attached to it, or I don't expect too much from it, because I think that gets into a slippery slope too. And
Mhm.
it's much better when I'm open-minded and just open and present and waiting for things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So much you said there about Hermes too, so important, and then you're seeing like these, again, that must have been difficult as you're doing the discernment because it's like, okay, this is definitely a synchronicity or coincidence here
Yeah,
because why is this
yeah,
turtle over here, right? And
yeah,
just moments like that in time. And
yeah,
now as a scholar of archetypes and tarot and everything else that's going on, and I'm sure that Rachel will speak to this a little bit as well because obviously Rachel has been really into like the comic ideas, the comic archetypes,
yeah,
and sort of the,
cool.
the mythological sort of character and characters that we embody, right? Or even like, there's this guy who talks about terrapsychology. Terrapsychology is we go to these
Mm,
places to help that place. Like you go to a Lawrence to help Lawrence express its
yeah,
archetype. Rather than you're expressing your archetype, you're helping Lawrence
yeah,
express the archetype of this space that's sort of this unique sort of place in the middle of the heartland, so to speak. So how for somebody that maybe isn't too familiar with archetypes, I know you can go more the secular route, you can go more of the kind of psychological, you go more of the sort
yes.
of esoteric. How do you view
Mhm.
archetypes for somebody that maybe isn't too familiar with it?
Yeah.
And what would you say in terms of ways to get in touch or tap into that for somebody that's kind of
Mm.
new to this?
Ooh, I love that. That's a really good question too. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so first touching base on the idea of comics. So religious systems and different belief systems, they were folks in their time and context trying to make sense of reality and their understanding. So then that's where you get like the Greek pantheon of you get Ares, Hermes, Artemis, all these different things that represent different realms of the human experience. Like we all know what war is, we all know what conflict is, we know what wisdom is, we know what communication is, and then a group of people come together and have this shared understanding, and then so they have this creative system that helps them make sense of their reality and their different all the things that are within them as a person. And so that's my understanding of the different religions and spiritual systems as they popped up throughout human history. And so in my modern day and age, I love comics growing up. I was just drawn to them of art and words. And it's like a story just waiting to be lived and experienced. It get experienced until someone looks at it and interacts with it. And so my understanding these days is that's my modern pantheon, the Marvel comics, Marvel gods, DC. That's those are archetypes. Those all represent something. When you think of Superman, you know exactly what Superman represents. He's a sun god. He's an alien that came from somewhere else, and he gets energy from this like ball of light that shines down on us, much like we do. And how can we be like informed by that? What does he represent? How can we aspire to be those things? And so I think of comics as my like modern pantheon, my modern system to interact with too. And so when I talk about archetypes, yeah, it's I'm always trying to like distill these things down into like the most simple basic concept. And so I think that's where like values really helps too. So
Mhm.
like we know Superman is honest. We know Superman is brave and compassionate and kind. That boy is raised in Kansas. So what does that tell me about this Midwestern mindset and this Midwestern way of being? And I love again these symbols that pop up in my life. I also love the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is this beautiful esoteric occult tale. This girl from Kansas gets swept up into a storm and gets flung somewhere else. It is in my mind an esoteric journey of her going through her own experience of like the she meets the scarecrow and she has to learn how to think because no brains. She meets the Tin Man. She has to learn how to feel because he doesn't have a heart. And then she meets the lion who is cowardly when he should be brave and he has to act and he has to like get through this thing. And so there's these esoteric concepts of thinking, feeling, acting. Um, Interestingly enough, in the story, the cowardly lion has two songs where like the first song, like he doesn't quite get there. So he needs a second song to finish the action. And for me, that's a lesson in sometimes the action doesn't carry through the first time. Keep trying it. You might keep going. And so in that story of the Wizard of Oz is this like beautiful tale of learning how to think and feel and then act. And in a lot of esoteric and occult systems, that's at the base of it. You think things, you feel things, you process it, you act on it, you try to bring it into the world. That's how I can like best distill down these like things that can be kind of like heady and sometimes a little woo-woo, as some folks say. And um, but I think if we really distill it down into these like simple processes of creative writing, art, music, that enables us to interact with these concepts and really like use it. Like these are tools. These are
Mhm.
tools that are inherently human because we don't know what else to do. We have to tell stories. We have to play games. Like that's all it is at the end of it. We're all trying to play games and tell stories. And when we can't do that, we get really stuck and we get really like out of shape. And I think that's where a lot of folks have a lot of difficulty managing their stuff when they don't have these creative outlets and these creative systems. And if we can just show people like it's all readily available, you just need pen and paper
Mhm.
and you can interact with so much and it's all within you and it's all around you too.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and yeah, it's so beautiful just to how you're able to sort of, because I think that's the thing people have trouble with sometimes. How do you ground
Mm,
archetypes into the everyday? How do I ground
mm,
archetypes in something that's meaningful for me when maybe they seem so far out there? I imagine another layer of this is you're in the heartland. A lot of what you just said would probably be maybe outside of Lawrence, maybe would be considered a little woo, maybe this whole
yeah,
conversation would be considered a little, but
yeah,
how do you bring these conversations to Kansas and Missouri and Northwest
mm,
Arkansas and these other places where they're having this vibrant conversation right now? What's going on there? And you see there being a shift in mentality, or do you think
sure.
it's a lot of effort on your all part to really get that conversation going? It sounds like it's organically growing pretty well. Maybe talk to a little bit about the Heartland situation
Yes.
there.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Um, so yeah, so in my work in the past few years, and that's been kind of my lesson too, is like, how do I talk to folks here in the Midwest? How do I put it in such ways that they can like understand and wrap their heads around it? And so when I talk about psychedelic work, I again try to break it down of this is a process that we go through to learn about ourselves and to go through behavior change and personal growth in such a way that it creates long lasting changes. I put it in the context of what are some of these at most need populations that we have among us, and a lot of it's EMS, emergency services, first responders, veterans, police, sheriff. I say we have these tools that could potentially help folks. Here are some best practices that we have based on clinical trials and evidence that we have going back several decades, and how can we create a system that can help support people that are most at need. And I haven't been outright shut out here in Kansas. I have had conversations where people are curious, people have heard, people have seen something on the news or in books, or Michael Pollan's book was really big on folks. So people know about these things and they're curious and they just want to learn more. And so when I try to explain it again, I try to get down to like really basic processes, and then we can kind of go from there in terms of like what are some more nitty gritty details of how to engage with these things. But I've had good luck so far, and that's also been a challenge of us of what are we trying to do here in Kansas, and then by extension the Heartland. I don't feel like in Kansas anything will be passed legislatively for like psilocybin or other plant medicines. Like we still struggle here in Kansas with like recreational medicinal cannabis. Like they just put a new bill in for medicinal cannabis not too long ago here, but there are certain people in political bodies that just don't even want to entertain it. And so my thinking is what's the best use of our time here in Kansas and the Heartland? And it is an education. It is saying like we have ketamine here as this legal source or a legal medicine that we can use. Again, what is this best practice? What's the set and setting, the preparation, the integration, medicine agnostic. And so we try to explain the process as it is. And then that helps people wrap their head around it more of it's more of a hopefully repeatable, minimize the risk, maximize the benefits, and explain it again in just like the most simple language. And people seem to wrap their heads around it.
Mhm.
Um, and then to share a bit about regionally what's been going on. So last year was kind of wild. We had the MAPS conference, I think in June. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go with that based on my work in community mental health as a case manager and a health and wellness coach. And then with my own private consulting, Alvadine Consulting, I was able to go on a scholarship. And talking about synchronicities and signs, I'll share a little bit about just like that last year because I think it's just I couldn't have written it better myself. So before the MAPS conference, early last December, I was just starting this job in community mental health, and about a week before the scholarships opened for MAPS, I got the job. And so when I applied for the scholarship at MAPS, I could say I'm a case manager, health and wellness coach working in community mental health. And I could say that honestly. And so I applied for that scholarship and then I started working my job, went through a 6 month coaching program, got that certification. And then the next week after that was the MAPS conference. So I got to go to the MAPS conference and say, I'm certified in all these things, got to do all these things. And then while out in MAPS, we met some folks based out in Springfield, Missouri, through some connections here in Kansas City that like someone knew someone that knew someone, and that connected us to Springfield. And then Springfield knew about Arkansas, and they were having a conference in Arkansas a couple of months after MAPS. So I went down there to speak with some other psychedelic society folks in Oklahoma and Missouri and Arkansas. And then from there, we had a conference in Arkansas a couple months later, or a conference in Springfield, Missouri a couple months later. And then a couple months after that, we had a conference out in Kansas City, Missouri. And so like these three like major conferences that like connected this whole heartland
Hmm.
was just kind of wild to see like pop up. And I see it as like multiple years of work because some of those other groups had started a couple years ago too. So it's like a couple years of work, and then all of a sudden, like bam, 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 all these things just like coming together in such a way that's organic and timely and is not forced. And so now we're talking with folks out there. We a potential working group of we're calling it the Psychedelic Alliance of the Heartland. So PATH. What's the path? And so we're talking about these cross-state conferences and more collaboration, and how can we really build the Heartland as its own thing as it's coming out in its own very organic way.
Hmm.
And I like to think of it as we're like four mycelial networks all finally like coming together at the edges. And so
Right.
now we're just this one big thing. So yeah.
That's great. No, I mean it's so important, and I say this to people all the time when we talk about policy. Everyone thinks, well, success is the end result of policy changing. But
Mhm.
sometimes you got to do what you're doing, which is like you got to get out there, you got to destigmatize, you got to educate. There is a process in places, especially where maybe people aren't ready in terms of policy, where eventually you're going to get enough people on your side that even if those people aren't ready, you have now the grassroots community to push them or push somebody else who, if that person doesn't want to do it, then you get them out of the office to get somebody else that can do it in
Right.
there,
Right.
and that's part of the process. So I think what you're doing in terms of the long term, seeing that sort of broad perspective and seeing kind of like, okay, how do we really sort of make sure that our community is given all the tools they need, given the information they need, the education they need. They're not sort of thinking about this sort of you know, all the propaganda that you hear over the many years about what these are bad or whatever, but really talking about them with a solid, grounded, sort of approach, which sounds like you're all doing there with the different conferences that are happening there, and then to see it happen with the back to back to back like that is just a signifier of like all the good work that's happening underground.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
starting to like sort of percolate up to the top, and I
Yeah.
think that's so important to see. And I talk about this a lot with the other teams. Is like, hey, even in the heartland, there's some conversation happening because it's really easy to dismiss again. Oh, this is just
Sure.
a progressive college town thing, and it's not really happening anywhere else. Like, no, but look at there's these conversations happening in places, and you're still in the progressive areas out there, but in a place that maybe you're having more out of the bubble conversations. So I think that's
Sure.
really really important and relevant. So good work on all
Yeah.
that out there, and I look forward to hearing much more on that.
Oh,
Now I know we have about 10 more minutes or so. We're going to shoot to Rachel for a question in just a second, but I do want to ask this one question I like to ask all the guests
yeah.
because I think it's important, and in terms of just getting our sense of what this movement is all about. Uh, when you hear the words decriminalize nature or the movement decriminalize nature, what do you think about? What comes to your mind? What do you see or hear or feel?
Mm. Ooh. I first think of the strange thing that you even have to like say like decriminalize nature, like it's already there. Like who criminalized it in the first place?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's funny because I hear arguments here in Kansas for medicinal or recreational cannabis as it's something that grows out of the ground and it's something God made. And these are conservative Midwesterners, and that's their viewpoint. God made it.
Hmm.
So it's there for you. Who are you to say no, this is not good for other people?
Hmm.
And so I also share that kind of sentiment too of like if it comes from the earth and it's natural, it's here for you. and it's made with you. We are also of nature. We didn't come into the world, we came out of it. We're like plants and animals. We come out of this thing, this mutual system that's arising. So that's also a very Taoist. I have Taoism and Buddhism as strong parts of my belief system, and that's a very Taoist. We're just part of it. It's part of the
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and I think that's a message that it sounds like you're tapping into and people in the area are tapping into, which is like even in the more conservative or maybe non friendly people out there in terms of psychedelic conversation or even cannabis. Although cannabis, believe it or not, sometimes maybe it's even having a harder time than some of the psychedelic mushrooms and
Sometimes.
things because of all the other stigma that's embedded in that. But to say like you're saying like, hey, these come from the earth. Who has the authority to criminalize something that God put here for us? That's coming for us to like have this communion with, or to have to see the divine with different eyes.
Yeah,
I think that's just such a it's a pitch that probably not a pitch as in like kind of a hey, this little pitch, but like it's another way to like talk to people that maybe aren't hearing or understanding the full context of it, being like who has the authority to do that, right? So I think
right.
interesting that that's come up, but yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that. And then
yeah,
we'll
no, for
toss it
sure.
over to Rachel for a quick question, and then we'll go have a little close down here.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a great conversation. If I was in there, I'm like we would have gone down a tangent when it came to
Yeah.
comic books for sure, for sure. But maybe we
Yeah,
can have
yeah.
a show on comic book archetypes in the future
Yeah,
because
maybe we should do like a
yeah,
roundtable or something like that where we
yeah,
Oh, that'd be awesome.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
I don't know, Ian, my shtick is basically I do cosplay and I read comic books
Cool.
live. So,
Awesome.
um,
Cool.
first of all, I want to thank you very much for being very candid and honest about talking about mental health because
Yes.
honestly, like there is still such a stigma when it comes to talking about mental health. I know it's a little bit more prevalent as like having awareness about it, but I think overall it's still so misunderstood and it's still very tough for people to I think get the help they need because first of all, you just coming out and saying like, "Hey, I'm bipolar. I did this to go get help," like that in and of itself is very courageous. So I just wanted to like thank you
Thank
for
you.
doing that because it's
Thank you.
tough because I've had my own stuff to deal with and friends to deal with, and like part of that is just like admitting like, hey, I need some help. I can't deal with this all in my head, right?
True.
So my question is going to come after this long preamble, so apologies.
Yeah.
I've been going through my own personal mental health crisis, and so my ways of dealing with it was going through stories, and how like superheroes have dealt with problems, like the end of existence and stuff, right?
Mm.
Um, but of course, I don't know if you're familiar in the DC storylines of the Crisis storylines, right? Crisis on Infinite
Oh yeah.
Earths, Final
Mm.
Crisis, all that kind of stuff. And so, in Final Crisis, I hope this isn't a spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know the end of it, but it's prevalent to what you were saying about music and frequency and
Sure.
everything. But I
Mm.
revisited this story because I really needed some light in the situation. Um, but anyways, there's something called the anti-life equation that Darkseid has, and he's pumping it out through all the media. So like
Mm.
depression and cruelty and all of this stuff, and it's kind of what's happening right now in reality if we think about how the news is and how it pushes these stories of like that put us in this state of feeling depressed. So
Mm.
Darkseid's pushing it all out and making everyone Darkseid. So they're like, oh no, we're gonna lose existence. What do we do? The
Mm.
solution is that Superman finds the note that negates the anti life frequency.
Yeah.
So he sings a song
Yeah.
that basically snaps everyone out of it.
Oh,
So I there's a weird thing about
beautiful.
that, right? So like Superman
Beautiful.
sings, and that's how it's not strength, it's not might, it's not like being the most powerful
Yeah.
being. It's like finding the right sound at the right time and the right note, and
Mm.
that is what finds harmony in the universe. So my question to you is this: that you give me a lot of Flash vibes, like I get the Flash from you, like the superhero Flash, because
Yeah.
like travel, like the idea of uh,
Mm.
the frequencies, being able to be aware of all these different timelines, and who wouldn't go mad if you were aware of the fact that you're in 5 million different places at once. So it's a tough job, but do you
Mm.
personally relate to any superhero, or is there a comic book story that you personally revisit? That kind of stuff.
Oh, I love those questions. Thank you, Rachel. That's beautiful. And thank you for sharing about your own stuff too. I hope things go well for you.
You've
Oh,
been
it's so
hard
interesting.
helping. Like it's just been synchronous. I was
Thank
like,
you.
oh, what a like we've had a lot of guests. Larry knows, but like it's just
Beautiful.
so interesting
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
harmony, I guess. Synchronicity.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you answer the question.
I love it. No, no, no. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh, beautiful. And thank you for the flash. I mean, that's a very Hermes sign. That's very mercurial, very fast, very connected. I love that. I'm a really big fan of Constantine, John Constantine. I know some
Oh,
folks are
I
familiar with the.
love
Yeah.
Constantine. I
hmm
cosplay Zatanna sometimes.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome. Oh,
Oh
awesome.
my gosh.
Um,
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
All of it. Yeah, so I saw the Constantine movie with Keanu Reeves. That's like 2005, I think. So I saw that when I was pretty like in high school, and I was like, this is so cool. Like who is this guy just like this rough and tumble dude just like doing magic and doing all these like crazy wild things. And so reading into his comics, I think he's also a DC comic guy too. And so like checking that out, yeah, Alan Moore, he was the guy that created him. And then similarly getting into Grant Morrison. I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison. He's or they go by they a very connected person as well, in terms of their
Chaos
understanding of
magician.
comics. Chaos Edition. Yes. Okay. So yes. So
Yeah.
I
I
will
know him.
self-disclose as a chaos magician.
Are
And
you?
yeah, practicing chaos magician.
Oh my
And again,
gosh.
it's all these systems. I take bits and
I
pieces of
love
different
I
systems. I mash it into my own. That's chaos magic. That's
so
also a
cool.
syncretism. Are you guys familiar with syncretism? A similar thing. You take these different belief systems, you make it into your own new system, and it informs you, and it works because it works, and you're tied to it, and you're tied to these connections. Um, and so
Constantine
with
calls it riding the synchronicity wave.
yeah, yes, beautiful, beautiful, yes. And so yeah, so when I was a few years ago when I was going through my stuff and like trying to figure my stuff out around the time of the crisis and getting better and digging back into creativity, Grant Morrison came on my radar. He's got this wild talk at Disinfocon. If you YouTube Grant Morrison Disinfocon, you should be able to find it. Be careful when you first open the video because he like how there's like this primal howl that he like lets out at the start. So like turn your volume down at first. But he essentially describes his process of comic books and writing, his views of chaos magic, things he calls sigils, a hyper sigil, which is essentially just like a sigil is a symbol. So the McDonald's arch, that's a sigil. The Nike swoosh, you see it, you know what it means. My little symbol here on the chair, that's my initials. That's my Ian Cook IC. It's based on my initials and the letters and all that, but that's what it means to me. So this creation, the Cosmic Water Closet, that's a hyper sigil. Grant Morrison wrote a comic called The Invisibles, where it was an experiment and he wanted to see what would happen if he wrote himself into a comic book and made things happen to that comic book character and see what would happen, and it affected his real life. Like he had this his main character go through like this like horrible like health complications and like collapsed lung and like all these different difficult things, and then he got sick. Or like he would write like someone coming into his life because he wanted a girlfriend and he wanted to be cool, so like he wrote someone into that comic and then someone would come along that looked like them. And so, like, what does that mean? Is he like creating reality, or is he like, in my view of chaos magic and this esoteric occult work, I think you're just increasing the chances of something happening. It's not nothing's guaranteed, and that's where you get slippery is when you think it will work for sure, but be open-minded. And so his was an experiment, and then for me, these past few years, like this has been the experiment of what happens when I live in very intentional, creative ways that's light and playful and fun, but I'm not attached to it. And so far, it's given me a lot. And so, Grant Morrison, The Invisibles, also Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, very much of Superman is this mythology. He goes through these trials of strength. I think All-Star Superman and The Invisibles, like beautiful introduction to archetypes and creativity. And yes, thank you for all that because I wanted to get there. I didn't know how I'd get there, but
Grant
thank you for that.
Morrison also wrote Final Crisis, which I was referring to. So yeah, it's all a
So
that's a and you
they know.
now that you say the chaos magician thing, I was like, it all makes sense now. So thanks for that. Back to
Thank
you,
you.
Larry.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ian, for that. It's always fun to expand in all the different directions, and I think that's this podcast is always great for that. So, is there anything that you'd like to sort of touch on that we didn't have a chance to touch on yet while we're closing up here?
Um, yeah, no, I think that's kind of a lot of the main points. I guess the last couple things I did want to mention for sure is we are in the planning stages of having something here in Kansas, here in Lawrence. We're calling it the Kansas Consciousness Conference. We're trying to the name came up to us in a call. It was like, oh, that's perfect. So we're taking this larger umbrella of consciousness And then all these things fit under it. So psychedelics fit under it, spirituality, meditation, yoga, breath work, all these other ways to engage with this. And so again, we're trying to explain this larger system in such a way that people can understand it, get access to facilitators, practitioners. We're also bringing in local mental health organizations and communities to, again, just like, here's the system. How can we use it to the best of our abilities? And so that's something we're planning here in Lawrence, late April. I think April 25th is our tentative date. Um, and then outside of that, otherwise, yes, my own private health and wellness coaching consulting, Alvadine Consulting. Just to give a little back history on that, of Alvadine is my grandpa's name. Alvadine Cook. So ADC, same initials, Ian Cook as well. So I use Alvadine as this. That's also the name of my music project too. And so I keep that name alive because he's passed on. But he was a psychiatrist that worked out in Topeka with veterans. He was in the Navy as well. And so he's a healer archetype for me. My grandma was a nurse. I was really close to them. They're big inspirations for me. So they are my healer archetypes. And so I think of them when I do this work as a healer as well. And working magic and all these other ways of just beautiful work. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and so if somebody wants to find out more about the conference, because that sounds amazing. If I wasn't already having an event on the 25th, that would be something I'd
Yeah,
mosey my way out there. It sounds like
sure.
the Tucson towards the science of consciousness, but I heard that got a little bit it's been canceled for the time being. So you're now the only consciousness conference happening. So that's no pressure at all. But how does somebody find out about that? And then how does somebody reach out to either the Lawrence Psychedelic Society if they're in the Kansas area or the vicinity,
Yeah.
or you're exactly your sort of your consulting business and all that kind of stuff?
Yes. So if you're looking for the Lawrence Psychedelic Society, if you Google us and then Linktree, you can find some of our sites. We've got Facebook, we've got some social media. Still working on the website for the conference itself. So maybe in the next couple of weeks I can shoot that out to you guys too. But if you Google Lawrence Psychedelic Society, you should find us. There's also a Psychedelic Society of Kansas City. So if you're more Kansas City based, you can reach out to folks there. They also have a great group led by Dale and Mooncat, and so we're all like one big family. Kansas City is just like 40-50 minutes out down the road from us. And so yes, we are connected here in the heartland. And then if you're interested to contact me personally, you can go to www.alvadine consulting, so ALVADEAN consulting. You can also email me, Ian at Alvadine Consulting. Also, if you want to connect on social media, I'm on Instagram as well, and then I'm starting to also post on YouTube as well. If you do Ian, or if you do at Cosmic Water Closet, I'm doing tarot card readings there. I'm going to start talking about my process, start talking about health and wellness and all this work. So yes, at Cosmic Water Closet, and you should be able to find me.
Great, wonderful. Yeah, and please send me out that and the promos for the conference too when it comes out. We'll make sure to get that out there on the large platform as well. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much, Ian. What a great conversation. Really enjoyed
Thank
kind
you.
of dipping into all the different areas. I think this is definitely worthwhile of another conversation. And as Rachel said, maybe even doing a roundtable on comic characters and archetypes and mythology and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, because I think that's a really fun exploration there. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Reminder, everyone, we are going live every 2 weeks, and you'll always be able to find our shows on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey live. But also the following week or two, maybe 2-3 weeks, we'll be on Spotify, Apple, and other podcast platforms once we get that up. And then we'll occasionally be putting up some clips from different shows on our social media platforms as well. Reminder that our next show is going to be February 22nd. We're going to have Howard Whitehouse to talk about psychedelics, consciousness integration, and he has some very interesting theories on the mind and consciousness and transformation. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, keep updated. Keep in mind we're booked out till about mid-May or June right at this point in time, so there's a lot of great shows coming up. And we're really excited to continue to have these great conversations. If you know anyone out there that you think should be out here talking to us on the podcast, please send them our way, because we always enjoy the different ways this conversation goes, and there's always amazing, fascinating things that people are bringing up to talk about, including what Ian's been talking about today. So again, one more time, thank you, Ian, for all your support here, and good luck with everything in your different psychedelic societies, but also with the conferences coming up and your work in general. And I'm glad to hear somebody out there is doing some good work for the Kansas people and people in the heartland. Thank you, Rachel, as well. Thank you all for listening in. And reminder, until next time, tune in, stay rooted, and let's grow together. Have a happy Sunday, everybody. Bye bye now.
Yeah.